So let me start with a simple example I was mentioning yesterday. So earlier, not now, but before, it was really difficult to create responsive web pages. By responsive, I mean if you look down here, the screen size is pretty big on a desktop computer, and whenever you're using a different device, let it be an iPad or like a phone, with the introduction of new devices, it became necessary for web developers to create accommodate everyone. So that is what responsive web pages are basically. So in order to accommodate everyone, let's see, for example, I open Apple website, and as you're trying to decrease the size of the screen, you can see that initially, if you main size is the same, but once it starts decreasing, you can actually see the screen changes. Even on the navigation on the top, it would change depending on the screen size. So once I decrease it to this one, you can see all the navigation items are collapsed into this one particular hamburger menu. And you can see the size of the images are also smaller. And if I try to decrease it more, you can see all of them fall into one place. So basically, it is our duty as a web developer, even if you look down here for those services, once you start on, you can see they all collapsed into different things down here instead of having under, instead of looking at this, it completely changes the look. So depending on the screen resolution, it is the duty of a web developer to make sure the screen looks good no matter what device you're trying to use. For example, if you look at the developer tools, there is an option down here beside the cursor. So toggle device bar. Once I click on that, the Google Chrome has this option where I can actually select a particular device. For example, if I selected iPad Pro, it would show how it would actually look on iPad Pro. And if I change it to a different device, like Surface Show, this is how it would actually look on that. And you can also see the screen resolution here, 540 by 720. And basically, you can select any other device, and you can see 360 by 640. And depending on the device, most of the devices have more height than width. So that is why you can actually see them contracting than anything else. So depending on your screen resolution, you can actually have an option here in the Chrome browser where you can see how it actually looks on different devices. So right now, I can also change it to iPad Pro, or I can just deselect this one, and you can see it gone back to a regular format. Anyways, so there are different ways of making responsive designs for our web page. And recently, the CSS came up with this grid system where it is actually really easy to do this. Earlier, it was actually really difficult. As you can see, depending on the screen size, I have to rearrange all of these particular icons or anything down here. So with the grid system, it became very easy to do that. So we would be going through that today. And let me actually create a HTML page. So in order to do that, actually created something down here, and let me save it. And starting next week, I would actually start using Visual Studio Code, and I will send you instructions about how to install it and what are the different things you actually need to have on that. So I would show it is actually easier to develop code using Visual Studio Code. Right now, I'm teaching you using just Notepad because this is the best way of learning HTML and CSS. So yeah, HTML, and let me also create another. Since I've created different classes, red and blue, let me also get those here. And you can already see that I have linked to the that particular style sheet. So let us actually open that web page and see how it renders. And I don't have anything special down here. All I've done is created different divisions, okay, with different colors, just so I can distinguish. So as I mentioned to you guys before, we have a new system called grid system in CSS. So basically think everything as a box down here. So we have a couple different boxes. As I mentioned to you before, CSS is nothing but different boxes. And the grid system uses the same thing. And in basic grid system, you would create, and right now I'm not showing you how it works, but I can rearrange however I want the boxes to be. I can have div 1 here, and div 2 here, and div 3 here, and I can do it in a simpler way. Anyways, starting with the basic concept. So in here, whatever parent element I have, like another thing is you would want to use as many divisions as possible because it's easier to style using that divisions compared to anything else. So divisions is nothing but to group things together, and this is how we would do it. And initially, you just have to style the parent wherever all of these tags are. So in order to do that, I would simply select the ID selector parent, and the simple way of actually saying this is a grid is saying display and mentioning it is a grid. Okay, that's the first thing to do. And within grids, this is, you can see it is actually divided into different rows and columns. So I would, we have 3 rows here, and I can have 3 columns. And depending on what we want, we would actually say, this is how I want to see the elements. So one of the things, as I mentioned, the first thing is I have to mention that it is a display of type grid. Then it would know, okay, I'm looking at grid. And in order to separate or show how the columns are separated, we have grid template column. This is another attribute or a property. In order to, the simplest way of actually rearranging those stuff is by mentioning the items in number of pixels. Once I do that, initially, if you see, this is how the web page is. Once I select that, as you can see, the grid actually divided them into 2 columns. As I mentioned here, I only have 2 columns. So there are 2 different ways of actually specifying how I want to show the HTML page. One is implicitly declaring, okay, or explicitly declaring. Here I'm explicitly saying this is how you have to rearrange. So since I'm saying grid template columns, I specified 100 pixel into 200 pixel. It created two different columns. First one, which is 100 pixel. Second one is 200 pixel. Let us see what happens if I put another one, okay, 300 pixels. Now it will divide into three different columns, as you can guess, and 100, 200, and 300 pixels. So this is one way of doing it, but even earlier, I was specifying, depending on your web page, right? It can be on a iPad Pro, or it can be on your iPhone or any other device, has to rescale. One of the best ways of easier ways of doing that or achieving that is not actually using pixel sizes. If you have to use a pixel size, then go for it when you think it's really necessary. But otherwise, I would actually prefer using pixel size. So another way of actually doing this, the same thing, is actually by using, let me comment this out, columns, and by mentioning fractions. Okay, so whenever I say a fraction, it basically is, so if you consider this entire grid, okay, if I just say there is one fraction here, which occupies everything, it would actually divide the entire space into one part. Fraction is nothing but one part. And if I say I want to divide this one part into a part, let me show you actually. If I say I want this to be divided like two fractions and one fraction. So divides the entire page into two fractions and one fraction. And you can see the first part is the two fractions. So it divides into three fractions, but it gives the first column to have two fractions and the second one to have just one fraction. Are you guys, do you guys have any questions? Is this clear so far? Okay, so if I want to actually divide the entire thing into multiple fractions, for example, I want everything to be, let's say, one fraction. Since I have how many, 11, let me make it 12, okay, to make it easier. And how many do I have? So if I want to have 12 different columns, this is how I would do it, right? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 more. So in total, I have 12 fractions, and it divides the entire page into 12 equal parts, and this is how it shows. But if, let's say, if I have 100 different items, that's difficult, right? So that is why they've introduced something called repeat. And repeat, when I say repeat, it picks how many times do I have to repeat that. Let's say I want to repeat that 4 times, and I just want 4 of these individual fractions. Now, if I do that, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let me show a better example. So instead of specifying that 12 times, I can just say I wanted one fraction, and I want that to be repeated 12. So that is what it actually shows down here. So far, so good. Okay. So I can actually also combine multiple things together. So for example, I want the first one to be one fraction and the rest of the ones to have to be repeated. I can also do that. So it would just have the first one fraction, and everything else would be repeated. So there is another function which is called min-max. Okay, min-max is what it actually sounds like. So I want the first one to be one fraction, second one to be minimum. So in here, the syntax is simple. When I say min max, it would pick the first one as a minimum and the second one as a maximum value. And in here, I can simply say max content. Let me show you that using a simple example than using all of these down here. Okay. So now I only have 3. So when I say first one is 1 fraction, it just has 1 fraction. Last one is also 1 fraction, but those would actually adjust based on whatever I have down here. So when I say it can be as small as 50 pixels, and it can be maximum up to however much the content is. Like say, I said 2 and extra here, because it can be however many pixels it is, but the maximum value it can occupy is the entire thing. So if I actually say something down here, let's say 2 and extra, and let me copy paste that. And if I do that, you can see actual area of this one is increased because I'm actually saying I want to use a max content in here. So, and similar to max content, I also have something called min content. So let me comment this out. And if I say min content, okay, whatever, so it would try to get everything under 50 pixels, and that is what it is. Okay. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions about what min max is and why do we use it? Or okay. So apart from right now, whenever I let me go back down here. So when I said these columns should have 1 fraction, min max of 50 pixel, min content, and 1 fraction, you see the first one is occupied in that way. And I haven't, and when I say explicitly mention, I'm only mentioning 3 columns down here, right? And you can see the rows are automatically filled because I'm not actually mentioning how the rows needs to be filled down. It automatically fills the rest of it. And similar to grid template columns, I have the same thing for grid template rows as well. So instead of having it in columns, I would simply divide everything into rows. So you can see how it actually looks once I actually use the same thing for rows. So repeat. And now it's actually filling everything in rows. So the same properties, whatever applied or whatever are applicable for columns, those are also applicable for rows as well. And whenever I say grid template columns or grid template rows, it is explicit definition. So I'm saying I explicitly need it to be this way. And rest of them, whatever I have, it would automatically fill them in terms of rows, as you can see in the previous example down here. Since I only mentioned the first 3 things, right? I only mentioned there are 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. That is what it does. It doesn't. It automatically fills everything else in terms of rows. Is that clear? Do you guys have any questions? Another thing you can do is combine, min max with everything else. Let's say I want a particular pattern. Let's say I want 50 pixel pattern, a pattern of 50 pixel and 100 pixel. That is how it actually divides everything. I want that to be 4 times. As you can see, I mentioned that it should repeat the pattern 4 times, 50 pixel and 100 pixel. And if I do that, that is what it does. And you can see it didn't fill out anything else because I explicitly only mentioned it has to repeat that 4 times. So 50, 100, 50, 100, 50, 100, and by 8th item, it's done repeating that column specification down here, and that is how it does. And the main problem, you can see that now as well, whenever I do that, it doesn't actually, as you can see in the Apple web page here, I was mentioning it has to be responsive, right? Once I expand or collapse, it has to go into the another, but I see a scroll bar here. People usually don't like scroll bar. Like think of Apple had the same web page, but I have to expand or move the scroll bar sideways. People usually don't navigate in that way. They would like to actually navigate top to bottom. So that is why, and what I'm trying to say is here, I don't have that. There are easy ways of actually doing that. Let me show you another example, how I can actually achieve that in the simplest possible way. I would simply say repeat, but instead of saying 4, I would simply say auto fill. Okay. When I say auto fill, it would automatically fill everything with those particular sizes. And it doesn't just stop at 4, but depending on how you actually, have the resolution, it varies. Let me show you that using a different example. Now I have it that way, but if you see, once I try to collapse it, it goes to a next row. So this is what a responsive web page is, and that is what we're trying to achieve, right? So when I try to contract or when I'm trying to make it smaller, you automatically see the divs actually going into the next line. This is what basically is a responsive page design is actually. So there are 2 different properties. One is autofill and another one is autofit. The main difference is, let me show you that using just 3. So I would say once I do that, let me refresh it. So when I do autofit, if I'm trying to it almost works the same way. I don't have any issues. So I can either use autofill or autofit, but I don't have the right example, but let me try to see if I have something else. Okay, if you see down here, if I have autofill, it only, it leaves a gap down here. Sorry, this is autofit, not autofill. So if I have an autofit, it actually leaves a space versus autofill doesn't actually leave a space. That is the main difference. If there is any empty space left, it actually doesn't try to fill. The difference between autofit and autofill. So is that clear? Do you guys have any questions about any of these properties.
Wish, can you repeat autofill and autofit?
So let me open another example of font. Okay. Okay. Let me also decrease the number. Okay. Now it probably is the same. Yep. Okay. So if I have autofill for these particular three, items down here, you see, when I have autofill, it automatically fills the entire space, no matter how big the browser is. Versus autofit, it only goes till a certain limit. It would actually leave some space. That is the main difference. Autofill automatically tries to fill the entire space. Autofit, on the other hand, it only goes to whatever maximum size I mentioned. So that is the difference. So no matter here in the autofill, no matter what I specify, it tries to just fill the entire space. And the maximum size I've mentioned here, let me show you that example, is 240 pixels. And let's see if does it show me anything else. Okay, that's down here. This is 100%. But anyways, it is 240 pixels, and that is how it actually shows. Is that clear? Or the only difference is autofill fills, autofit only goes to up to whatever maximum size I mentioned. In this case, it's 240 pixels. So yeah, that is the difference.
Autofill, do we need to mention the pixels measuring or something?
Yep.
Or otherwise, it will automatically fills the space.
Right now, I have 240 pixels. I'm saying it has to automatically fill everything. And here I'm saying minimum it can go to 240 pixels, but maximum up to one fraction. It's the same thing, same syntax for autofit as well. There is not much difference. So when I use either one of them, instead of saying 12 or 14 or something, in the example down here, you see, I'm saying it has to repeat up to 12 times, right? What if I have 20 elements, or what if I have 100, right? It only goes to 12. After that, it tries to fill in the next row. But that is why we have these properties, autofill and autofit. Basically tries to rearrange everything else, even though if I don't even mention however many rows I have to go. So this one, that is the main advantage of using autofill. I can have 100 divs or 1,000 divs. It automatically fills all the space with those based on whatever specification I have here. Autofill and the size of that particular element or tag. So is that clear, or is that still confusing?
It's good, Anish.
Okay. So let me go back down here. So far, you've only seen that I mentioned everything in terms of, let's say, columns, right? Now we can try to, now let's try to combine both of them. And let's see how it looks like. Where is this? Right here. Okay. And I have everything. Okay. To make some things easier, I would just have 2 columns. But let's say, instead of saying whenever I say auto versus template, for templates, it's explicit. When I say explicit, it depending on the number of items I have here, it only divides them into so many items, like so many rows or columns. So for example, explicit means I'm actually saying this is how many I want. And explicit definition is grid template, and it can either be rows or columns. So this is what an definition. I'm sorry if my spelling is wrong, but so this is explicit definition. There is also implicit. Implicit in the sense I'm trying to use auto. So I don't have just 2 columns or 2 rows. Depending on what I mentioned down here, it automatically fills the rest of them. It can be 10, 100 or something. So in grid, if I say template columns, since I'm using template, since I have 100 pixel and 200 pixel here, it would actually divide the entire thing into 100 and 200. So this would be 100 pixel. This would be 200 pixel. But if I specify auto rows, it doesn't have to be just 2. It can have multiple rows. So let's say I mentioned them to have a 30 pixel or 50 or whatever I want to. In that case, it would actually divide every single row into 30 pixels, no matter what it is. So it's not obvious it's 30 pixel everything, but let's imagine everything is equal. And the first one would be 30 pixel long. The entire thing from here to here is 30 pixel. This would be 30 pixel, 30 pixel, 30 pixel. So when I say implicit, it automatically takes it as granted for everything else. Let me show you what how it actually renders on the web page. And so as you can see, all the rows are only 30 pixels, right? It didn't just do one of the rows and it just stopped there, but it did every row to be 30 pixels. But if I also want to divide the rows to have more than one definition, like I want the first one to be 30, second one to be 50. Again, third one to be 30 and fourth one to be 50. I can simply mention that and you can see one. The first one is 30, second one is 50, so on and so forth. So these are different ways you can actually mention all of those. And you can also define an explicit, I would also add an explicit row and you can see what I'm saying. So let's say I want the first 2, just the first 2 in this case, to be 170 pixels. So in here, the first one would be 70 pixel, okay? And second one would be 100 pixel. This one would be 100 pixel. $70 pixel. The second row height would be 100 pixel. But since I'm saying the rest of them to have 30 and 50, that is what it would actually follow for the rest of them. So later on, however many rows I have, could go on with 30, 50, 30, 50, and so on and so forth. So are you guys following why do we have explicit and why do we have implicit? Okay, so explicit, again, I'm repeating, explicit specifically says these are the only things I have, and rest of them you should automatically fill. Implicit is I'm just saying anything else you have to follow this particular pattern. So let me save this and refresh our page. You can see in here, the first one is, as I mentioned here, 70 pixels. Next one is 100 pixels. The rest of them are 30 and 50 pixels. Since I'm saying I don't know what all the rows from after the second row should be of this length. So that is how it's divided. And I can, again, I just don't have to have them in terms of pixels. I'm just using this as an example, but I can use them as fractions. I can use a min max. I can use this one, autofill, or anything else in here. So I can simply say one fraction and one fraction here. That would also be automatically, it would divide them into particular fractions, and I can also say one fraction and two fractions here. When I use fractions, the main difference is it would try to fill the entire page, versus when I use pixels, it only defines to that pixel. That is one of the reasons why I specifically said use only pixels when you think it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, I would use fractions. So another thing I want to mention is, apart from dividing everything into fractions and all of that, there is also lines, grid lines. So everything down here is divided into grid lines. So let's say I have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and okay. It always starts with 1. It goes till 4. Come on, 1, 3, and 4. Those are grid lines. Apart from right now, we are actually mentioning everything, in parent, and I'm saying this is how I'm dividing them. No matter what it is, I'm dividing the entire thing into templates and columns. But if I want to actually specify it depending on the particular, let's say, let's say we have multiple IDs. Okay. If I want to actually divide everything into a grid, but I want to use divide them based on those particular divisions. Like I want division 1 to have a particular style, or division 2 have a different style, and so on and so forth. Since I mentioned to you, everything is divided into 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. These are called grid lines. And also similar to what we have in columns here, it is also divided into rows down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would start on the top again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So in order to mention that the first one, the one down here, is occupying from grid line 1 to grid line 4, I can also do that using grid line, grid column, and I would say start. Okay, it's simple syntax. I'm saying the first one should start at grid line 1. It should go till grid line 4. So in order to do that, I would say column, grid column start 1 and grid column end. So I would simply say 4. And I can also do the same thing for the rest of them. So if I don't specify anything for the rest of them, they would automatically, again, it would actually use the implicit definition. It would automatically fill in the rest. So that is one of the advantages of using grid systems. So I would say another way of doing the same thing, instead of saying grid column start and grid column end, I can say simply grid column. And I can simply specify it starts at 1 and ends at 4. The first one is start and the last one is 4. And let's say I want the 3 to be different. Okay. Now I don't want to start at 1 and end at 4. I want to start at, let's say, 2 and end at 3. So I can also do that. So in here, it would, where does it actually, I also have 4. Okay. Let's say it starts at 3 and ends at 4. Once I do that, it almost looks the same. Why does it look the same? I'll get back to you on this, the grid lines. I don't have good examples right now. Why is this? What if I don't specify? Nothing changes. I'll get back to you on this grid lines. I don't have a good example, but anyways, this is how it divides. You also, apart from having basic grid fractions, you also have grid lines. Usually it goes from 1 to 4. And okay, do you guys have any questions apart from the grid lines, what I've explained so far with any of the template columns and template rows, or explicit and implicit definition, or any of repeat, min, max, or anything else?
No, Miss. Good. As of now.
Okay. So let's say, let me go back to our example again. And you can see here again, you know, I have the entire page down here. When I try to conk or make it smaller, you see different content is arranged in a different way, right? Depending on the actual size of the web page. You can also see on the top, it says 1340 by 1050, or, you know, depending on the actual size, pixel size, it varies. And we can do something similar to our page. And that is what we're trying to do right from the beginning. We're trying to get something responsive, like a responsive design. So since the easiest way of actually achieving that is through grid template areas. So let me show you grid. show you that using something simple. So one of the things I have to mention, first thing I have to mention is I have to look at the IDs of these particular divisions. For example, I have one. Okay, let's say one, and I have to give it a particular grid area name. Okay, let's say area name, and let's say I want this to be the actual header, like what we have down here. Right on the top, you can see this is the entire header. So that is what I want that to be. So let me rename it to header, and I want to name the grid area header as well. So I would do that. So similar to in order to achieve responsive design, this is one of the ways you can use grid. So first thing is I have to individually name all of those divisions, like, and I have to specify what the grid area is. So similar to that, let's say I have two, okay, and I want the second one to be named as navigation. Let me actually get this from here. And similar to that, I've named rest of them. Okay, I have named the ID, the third one to be named as main, the fourth one as ads, fifth one is featured and footer. Okay, and what I would do down here in columns and rows is I would actually say how many columns and rows I want. Let's say for our page, I would like to have 3 columns. Okay, but I want to have rows, and I want 4 rows. The first one to be of 1 fraction, second one to be of 2 fractions, another one of 2 fractions, and last one is 1 fraction. Okay, so far so good. So I have 3 columns and 4 rows. And I'm trying to divide this entire page into different sections. So, and this is how I would actually do that. And let's say grid template. So similar to here, I'm saying this is the area, right? So in the actual parent, I would say areas. This is where I'm actually defining the entire areas. And if you look at this one, it would be actually easy to follow. So I have 3 fractions on the top, okay? And I would want to start with the header, right? So I would mention header, header, header. So I have 3 columns, first 3 columns filled, and only 1 row, right? The first row is filled, the 1 fraction. Okay, I should also define the second row now. So it's simple. Now I want it in this format, navigation. I want main and ads. Okay, so it would pick the second row to be first column to be nav, second column to be main, third one to be ads. And similarly, I'm trying to fill the rest of them. I want that to be nav, main, and whatever I have here, featured. So whatever you have defined here, like grid template columns, I have 3 columns and 4 rows. I should do the same thing down here. So far I've defined 3 rows, 3 columns, right? And 3 rows. I have 1 more row to fill. So I would say I want the last one to be filled with footer and footer. That is all I have to do. So first thing you have to remember is I have to name individual IDs with what the area has to be named as. So I'm saying the grid area, and that to be named as header, okay, or nav, or whatever it is, depending on how you want to lay out your web page, okay. And second thing is I have to define grid template columns and rows, depending on how I want to define the page. Like this is where it needs to go. I need to have so many rows and so many columns. So I have 3 columns and 4 rows. The first row is 1 fraction, 2 fractions. The second row, third row is 2 fractions. Last one is 1 fraction. And finally, I have to define how all of these needs to be set up. In order to do that, we have the grid template areas property, and I should define exactly how I defined it here in terms of columns and rows. I have 3 columns and 4 rows. And once I do that, I'll okay, down here. And that is how it's arranged automatically. So you see how simple it is. Once I do this work, I don't have to, in earlier ways of actually rearranging different headers or navigation or anything, it was not easy as this one, but this one, I actually can specify where each thing needs to go. But the problem with this one is no matter how big or small the browser is, you see, is always remaining constant, because that is what I said. I didn't actually say how they should expand our contract depending on the size of the browser. So that is the next thing we would do. In order to do that, we have a property called another thing. I would wrap the entire thing, see, the media, screen, and I don't know how the syntax came to be or how what is media and screen, but this is how the syntax is. For media, I would specify media, screen, and whatever the minimum width. So as long as the width is 601 pixel, 601 pixel, this is how it remains. Once it is less than 601 pixel, wait, let me refresh the page. And you see, after it's been 601 pixel, if it's less than that, it automatically collapses into one or all of them into different rows. So this one, when I say min width, I would specify this one, and I would say minimum width. So until the width is 601 pixel, do this, whatever I have here. After that, I'm saying it needs to, it would just collapse. I haven't created any other system for that. That is why it's collapsing. Is this clear? Do you guys have any questions regarding the areas and how we define any of the IDs or anything else? Okay, so yeah, this is as simple as it can get. And if let's say, as I mentioned before, if you also look down here, let's say, see, for iPad Pro, this looks fine, but let's say Moto 4G, this is how it looks. But let's say I want a different style for depending on the pixel size and all of these. Okay, even on a Surface Duo, it just looks multiple rows down here, just with one column. So if I want to mention, let's say, a particular size for an iPad Pro versus particular size for, let's say, a phone, depending on how I want to look at it. So I can actually do that here using the same properties. So let me create another one of these. Let's say so right now I'm saying up to 601 pixel, right? Up to 601 pixels, this is how it needs to look like. I haven't mentioned any other widths. So in order to do that, similar to min width, I have max width. So I'm saying whenever the width is equal to this one, 600 pixels or more than that, sorry, up to 600 pixels, and in simple terms, between 400 pixels or 401 pixel and 600 pixel. This is how I want the page to look like. And let me define that. I'll say I need just one fraction. And I change the area here. So I'm saying I only need one column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Why I have one column? I want 2 columns. Okay. So let's say this is how this one. Let's say this is how it looks on desktop. But when it moves to, let's say, like a tablet, iPad, or a Samsung tablet, or a Microsoft tablet, whatever it is, this is how I want that to look at. So I'm defining it needs to have the header needs to be. So I have to define 2 columns and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 rows. So first one I defined it to be having header and header. Second one I would simply say I want that to be nav and main. And third one I still want ads and main. So 1, 2, 3, and 2 more rows to be defined. So, and in case if I want to leave a space, blank space, I can put a dot here. So I would say dot here and main. So if I don't want to mention any particular area, whatever I've defined here, I can simply put a dot. When I say a dot, it says I want an empty space down here. And sorry, and finally, I have another one here. Last one to be having just footer and footer. So up to minimum width of 601 pixel, this is how it needs to look. And later I said, in between 600 pixel and 400 pixel, this is how it needs to look like. Let me refresh the page and let's see. And once it reaches that, you can see it automatically adjusted based on whatever I mentioned here. And since I didn't mention featured in here, let's say let me mention featured in here. You can see that, right? The fifth one automatically went to the last one since we didn't actually specify anything down here. If we don't specify anything here, it would automatically adjust based on the screen resolution. And it thought it would just put it at the end, but anyways. So one of the things you don't want to forget is if you can just mention that again. And now it goes down here, and depending on the screen resolution, it automatically varies. And let's say this is how the minimum width of 401 pixel is a tablet. You can also mention another one, which is for a phone. So it's again, it would let me actually could be same as what I have here. Let me remove the comments down here. So in here, I would say up to a maximum width of 400 pixels. This is how it needs to look like. Since everything, I've mentioned everything else. And whenever you're looking at a phone, mostly you would have just one column with multiple rows, and that is what I'm defining it here. Let's say I have header, the second one is nav, third one is main, and last one is footer. If I want multiple rows, again, I can specify how many areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's say I have header, nav, main. Let's also put ads down here, and featured 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and finally footer. And also you can see, I don't actually have to do this, but anyways, I can specify. If I don't specify this one, it would automatically be placed in different rows. But anyways, I'm trying to define everything. And once it's 600 to, this one is not actually contracting, but let's say using this one. And instead of saying Surface Duo, let's say I'm using Moto G4. And this is how it looks on a Moto G4 versus Galaxy X5. It looks similar. So up to maximum width of that. So now on a Pixel 2, the resolution is a little bit better. So actually I can show all of these in this way. And this is how it looks like an iPad Pro, Surface Duo, and Galaxy Fold. But anyways, do you guys understand why do we have responsive design, and do you have any other questions? Okay, guess all of these things are clear. I've actually downloaded some examples some person did online. Let me show you. And you can see, if I can find it. Okay, yep. So this is another example. Some guy online created, and I've just downloaded his source code, and this is what I'm looking at. And it's not just, the blocks you're looking at down here. Okay, can be more than that. That is why I'm showing you this one. And you can see, no matter the size of the web pages, he defined the pictures to just fit fine. So, and when it's actually mobile, this is how it would look like. And if it's an iPad or something like that, it would look like this. And if it's a regular desktop, this is how it would look. So you can actually create really good responsive web pages just using grids. And it's as simple as I've discussed it here. So just using row, columns, rows, and areas. Okay, I'll show you guys another example the same person created, and let's make it great. Okay, the only difference between the photo grid and this one is you can see they have actually placed some animations down here. So and also the styling is a little different. If you see if I've contracted, if it's at minimum width, this is how it shows. Not as this one. So anyways, what I'm trying to tell you is you can actually create really good responsive web pages just using grid system. Any questions? Okay, so I want to start Bootstrap, but I think I don't want to start today and do it for half hour and do the rest of it tomorrow. I would, not tomorrow, but Thursday. I would start with Bootstrap fresh, since that is another topic which probably would take the entire hour and a half or probably more. So I would start with Bootstrap in the next class, which we have on Thursday. But this is what
is it like Anvish, is it like alternative for grids?
It is so Bootstrap is a framework, CSS framework, which is designed by Twitter, okay. And they gave it for free. In here, you can see everything. You can actually define the fractions, right? I can define the first one to be 2, so on. I can have 100 different fractions here, and it would divide everything into however many fractions I have. But in Bootstrap, you only have 12 fractions, or it's always divided into 12 different groups, and
Only
you
limited
actually,
fractions.
yeah, only limited fractions. But I'm teaching you Bootstrap because it's used everywhere. I use that at work, and I think even Moni, she uses it at her work. No matter what job you go, there are most places uses Bootstrap because that was initially introduced before the grid system, and since it was already people were already using it, they started continue using it, and it's one of the most popular CSS styling things. And also in grid system, you have you can only define divs, right? In Bootstrap, it's not just that. You can also define, let's say, going back to our initial code sample. This is not. So you have input items, right? This one, text box. You have text area. I have buttons. I have different things here. I can style everything based on a predefined format. And let me actually show you an example. Bootstrap, sorry. Bootstrap, let's say buttons. Just for buttons, you can see they have, all I have to do is I have to specify the class of it. I can like say BTN. And if I say BTN primary, it would get this first one. I don't actually have to worry styling each and every button to be of a particular color or particular size or anything. All I have to do is specify the class name, and it would automatically generate me this particular style of element. And that is a best thing about Bootstrap. So they already defined everything for us. They're just giving it to us in a silver plate, and we are just trying to use that in our web application. So, and it's also one of the most popular ones. And yeah, the only disadvantage or thing is it divides everything into 12 blocks, and you have to use those 12 blocks however you want to. But apart from that, that's not a major disadvantage. As you can see, you can divide any page easily into 12 blocks. But they have a style defined for everything. For example, drop down, everything. So it's easier to just define the class name, right? I would say class and the name of the class, and it would automatically create the style for me. I don't have to worry anything. So that is the advantage of using Bootstrap. And yeah, I think it would be better if I teach that in one class than multiple classes. It would be easy to understand or follow through. So anyways, yeah. You guys have any other questions regarding the grid system? How do we use it, or anything else? Okay, so my assignment for you guys today would be just to use the grid system. Divide everything in your page. I've seen your assignment, Lakshmi, so I know you've used tables, right? Tables is one way of dividing
Grid.
everything. Yeah, you can actually use grids. Also,
Okay.
you can have a responsive design based on your browser, whoever or whatever device they are looking at. It would look really good. So
Okay, okay.
So
Yeah, sure.
that would be the assignment. Just divide whatever page you have created into different grids. And yeah, so I'll share you guys.
So instead of tables, I'll use the grids. I can use the
Yeah,
grids.
just use grids. Yeah,
Okay.
that is the best way of practically understanding how to use grids. So yeah,
Okay.
I'll share you guys the examples I created and also another example I found online. Where is that? For this one, so you guys can actually see how they use this. Okay. If you guys don't have any questions, thank you and good night. I will share the class on YouTube and also give you the assignment on WhatsApp. So I'll share the assignment on WhatsApp. You guys have a good night. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.